It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday. The kind of day where nothing bad ever happens. The air smelled of rain, the parking lot of the Oak Ridge Mall was full, and the sound of children's laughter mixed with the faint hum of pop songs from the loudspeakers. Somewhere in that crowd, a woman named Claire Donovan was holding the small hand of her 4-year-old son, Evan. They had come for groceries, maybe an ice cream afterward. That was all. She still remembered the feel of his tiny fingers, warm, restless, always tugging, always exploring. "Stay close, sweetheart," she'd said, and he had nodded with that solemn look only children have, the one that makes parents believe everything is safe. Inside the supermarket, the world smelled like detergent and ripe fruit. Claire put a carton of milk into the cart. Evan wanted cereal with the cartoon tiger on it. They laughed. She turned her back for 7 seconds, just long enough to pick the right box. When she turned around, he was gone. At first, it was the usual panic, that split second of disbelief. Maybe he'd wandered to the candy aisle. Maybe he'd seen something shiny. She called his name once. Then twice. Her voice cracked on the third. The sound didn't carry far. The store was too full of chatter, too normal. A manager asked if she was okay. "My son," she said, her voice trembling. "He was right here." They began to search, first politely, then desperately. The loudspeaker called his name. "Evan Donovan, age 4. Please come to the front." Minutes passed. Then 15. Then 40. And the world began to tilt. By the time police arrived, the air inside the store had changed. It felt heavy, electric, unreal. The aisles were half empty, the fluorescent lights suddenly too bright. Claire sat on the floor near the checkout counter, clutching Evan's little red jacket, the one he'd taken off when they came in because he said he was too warm. She couldn't remember how it got into her hands. Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, like the sky had decided to cry for her. Police officers sealed the exits, questioned witnesses, reviewed the grainy security footage. On the tape, you could see her, smiling, turning away for a moment, and then just absence. No man in a mask. No struggle. Just a child walking out of the frame and never walking back in. That night, the police knocked on her door at 1:23 a.m. They hadn't found him. No leads. No ransom note. Nothing. Claire's husband, Daniel, sat in silence, his hands covering his face. She couldn't cry. Not yet. Not until her body understood that her soul had just been cut in half. In the days that followed, the world became unrecognizable. Her home was filled with officers, dogs, cameras, reporters. Neighbors whispered. Strangers prayed. Every morning she woke up hoping it had been a dream, and every morning reality greeted her with the same quiet cruelty. Evan's room was still empty. She would walk in, sit on his bed, and listen. Sometimes she thought she could still hear him, his laugh echoing faintly from somewhere down the hall. But the house only answered with silence. The first week passed like a fever, the second like an ache. And by the third, even the police had started using words she refused to hear: unlikely, gone, cold case. But Claire didn't believe in endings. She couldn't. Not yet. Because somewhere inside she could still feel him, the way only a mother can. That invisible thread that no time or distance can cut. And she whispered into the dark each night, like a prayer. "Evan, if you can hear me, I will find you." The first 72 hours were a blur. Every cop in the county was looking for a 4-year-old boy with sandy blonde hair, green sneakers, and a smile bright enough to stop strangers. Posters went up on light poles, in diners, at gas stations. Missing Evan Donovan. Claire printed dozens herself, her fingers trembling as she fed them through the old inkjet printer in the kitchen. At first, the town responded with kindness. Volunteers searched fields, rivers, the nearby woods. Reporters came, microphones flashing. Her house turned into a command center, coffee cups, maps, radios, and the constant hum of voices. Someone always said, "We'll find him." But 3 days became 5. 5 became 10. And hope began to turn into something heavier, not gone, just colder, slower, harder to carry. On the 11th day, police found a shoe by the riverbank. Green. They brought it to her in a plastic bag. Claire recognized it instantly, the left one. The right was still under Evan's bed. Her body went cold. The officer said gently, "It might not mean anything." But Claire's heart screamed that it did. Test came back. The shoe was Evan's. But there were no footprints nearby, no signs of struggle, no trace of a body. Just absence. The kind of absence that eats at time itself. The media loved the story, the perfect tragedy. A beautiful young mother, a vanished child, a mystery. Cameras parked outside her house for weeks. Journalists asked cruel, thoughtless questions. Did you ever discipline him? Could your husband have been involved? Every word felt like a knife. Daniel began to crumble. He stopped speaking, stopped eating, stopped sleeping. One night, he said the words Claire feared most. "Maybe we have to let him go." She looked at him like he'd just betrayed God himself. "Let him go," she whispered. "He's out there, Daniel. Our son is out there. And he's waiting for me." By the end of the month, he had packed a bag and left. Claire stayed. Not because she was strong, but because she didn't know how to do anything else. Every morning, she called the detective in charge, Detective Harris, who had grown weary but patient with her daily calls. "Mrs. Donovan," he'd sigh. "There's nothing new." "Then find something new," she'd reply. She made binders of every report, every witness statement, every false lead. Her living room became an archive of obsession, walls lined with timelines, maps, photographs. Friends stopped visiting. Then the calls stopped. Then the letters. By the first anniversary of Evan's disappearance, even the newspapers had moved on. But Claire hadn't. She drove to every town within 200 miles, checking schools, parks, playgrounds. Sometimes she thought she saw him, a flash of blonde hair, a laugh that sounded too familiar. Once she followed a little boy into a store, convinced it was him. The child turned, confused, and her heart broke all over again. At night, she'd sit by the window with the police sketch of how Evan might look now, older, different, unfamiliar. She'd whisper the same promise over and over. "I will find you, even if it takes my whole life." By the 5th year, the search had changed. Her husband had remarried. Her friends had new families. Claire was still alone, and the police had quietly closed the case. Detective Harris came one last time, older now, tired. "Claire, I'm sorry. There's just nothing left to follow." She nodded, but inside, a new kind of fire lit. "Then I'll follow it myself." She sold her car, her jewelry, even the house. She bought a used van, filled it with maps, and began driving across states, visiting orphanages, small towns, foster homes. Some people thought she was insane. Others pitied her. She didn't care. Because somewhere, she believed, her son still breathed under the same sky. And when faith is all you have left, you hold it like oxygen. On the 10th anniversary of the disappearance, she stood by that same riverbank where they had found the shoe. The water was calm, the wind quiet. She placed a toy boat in the current, the one Evan had loved. As it drifted away, she whispered to the horizon, "If you're still out there, baby, find your way back to me." That night, in a cheap motel outside Denver, she opened her notebook to a fresh page and wrote the words that would define the next decade of her life. "I will not stop until I know the truth." It was winter again, her 10th winter without Evan. Snow covered the streets of a small town in Colorado where Claire had settled for a while. She lived above a laundromat now, in a room that smelled faintly of detergent and loneliness. Her hair had turned darker, her hands thinner. But her eyes, those tired blue eyes, still carried the same fire. She had learned to live in fragments, working odd jobs during the day, scanning missing persons databases at night. She had memorized the faces of hundreds of boys, each one a possibility, each one a heartbreak. One night, around 2:30 a.m., she sat at her small desk, sipping cold coffee, scrolling through an online forum for families of missing children. Someone had posted a grainy photo from a shelter in Oklahoma. A teenage boy, maybe 14, with sandy hair and familiar eyes. Claire froze. Her breath stopped mid-chest. She zoomed in. There was something, not exact, not certain, but possible. She sent an email to the shelter immediately. No response. Then another the next day. Still nothing. By the third day, she was already on the road. The shelter was a beige building on the outskirts of Tulsa, surrounded by frostbitten grass and a chain-link fence. The woman at the reception looked startled when Claire arrived. "Ma'am, we can't just show you the kids." "Please," Claire interrupted, her voice breaking. "Just one boy. I need to see if it's him." The woman hesitated, then sighed. "He left 2 days ago. Ran away again." "Where?" "No idea. Happens a lot." Claire stepped outside, her body trembling, her heart split between hope and despair. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at the road disappearing into the snow. Was it him? Had she been close again, only to miss him by hours? That night, she slept in her van behind a gas station. She dreamed of a boy knocking on her window, smiling, saying, "Mom, I found you." When she woke, the glass was fogged with her own breath. She started the engine, whispering to herself, "Next time I'll be faster." In the years that followed, her life became a rhythm of false hopes and faint traces. Sometimes a clerk would call from another state, "A boy here matches your description." She would drive for hours, sometimes days, only to find out it wasn't him. Each time she'd thank them, return to her van, and sit in silence. Not crying, not screaming, just listening. Listening for something she couldn't explain, as if the air itself carried echoes of her son's name. Then, one spring morning in 2008, something changed. She received a call from a retired detective, Harris. His voice was older, slower, but warm. "Claire," he said softly, "I never stopped checking, you know." "Harris," she whispered, "after all these years? I found something you should see." The next day, she drove 12 hours to meet him at a small diner off Route 50. Harris looked thinner, but his eyes still carried the sharpness of the man who had once promised to find her son. He slid a folder across the table. And said, "A photograph." A group of high school students at a charity event. One boy in the back row, tall, blonde, smiling nervously. Claire's hands shook. She didn't breathe. "This photo was taken last year in Kansas," Harris said. "The school didn't release the student's name, but I ran facial recognition through an old contact at the bureau. There's a 72% match with Evan Donovan." She looked at the boy's face again, the curve of his jaw, the shape of his eyes. There was no doubt in her heart. "It's him," she said. "It's my son." The detective warned her. "It might be coincidence. You should prepare yourself." But she was already gone, not physically, but emotionally. Every cell in her body screamed move. Claire arrived in Kansas 2 days later. The town was small, the kind where everyone knew everyone else. She parked across from the high school, watching kids pour out of the building in clusters. Laughter. Backpacks. Then she saw him. A boy, about 16, wearing a gray hoodie, walking alone. The same sandy hair, the same uneven gait Evan used to have when he ran to her after preschool. Her heart thundered so hard she thought she'd faint. She stepped out of the car and whispered, "Evan." The boy looked up, confused. His eyes, green. Exactly the same shade as hers. But then his face shifted, puzzled, cautious. "Do I know you?" he asked. She froze. Her throat closed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. You look like someone I lost." He gave her a kind smile, that same shy tilt she'd seen 1,000 times in her dreams. "I hope you find them," he said and walked away. Her knees gave out. She sat on the curb, trembling, sobbing silently into her hands as the crowd of teenagers passed. Was she losing her mind? Or had she just seen her son and let him go again? That night, she checked every record, every yearbook, every missing child database she could find. The boy's name was listed as Michael Reynolds. Born 1992. Adopted at age 5. No history before that. Her hands went numb. She stared at the screen until her eyes blurred. It couldn't be coincidence. She printed his photo and pinned it to her wall. And in the silence of the motel room, her voice trembled through the air once more. "I found you, Evan. This time, I'm not letting go." Claire didn't sleep that night. She sat on the bed of her motel room, surrounded by open folders, news clippings, and a single printed photo, the boy called Michael Reynolds. Every time she looked at him, her chest tightened. There were too many things that matched. His smile. His eyes. Even the small scar above his eyebrow, the same place Evan had once fallen from his tricycle. But the records didn't make sense. According to the adoption file, Michael was found abandoned at a hospital in Wichita in 1996, 2 years after Evan vanished. No parents ever came forward. No fingerprints. Just a small boy, silent and terrified, who wouldn't say his name. Claire's hands trembled as she traced the lines of the document. Abandoned. The word stabbed her like a knife. Her son had never been abandoned. He'd been stolen. The next morning, she drove to Wichita General Hospital. The building was old now, yellow bricks and peeling paint, but the staff still kept records. After an hour of pleading, the archivist, a gray-haired woman named Ruth, agreed to show her the microfilm files from 1996. The record was simple. Male child, approximately 6 years old, found outside a gas station on Route 54. Malnourished. Nonverbal. Hospitalized for 2 weeks. Transferred to social services. Claire covered her mouth. 6 years old. That would have been Evan's age in 1996. Her heart raced so fast she thought she might faint. "Do you have any photos?" she asked. Ruth frowned. "Maybe, but that was a long time ago." She disappeared into a back room. 10 minutes later, she returned with a dusty envelope. Inside, there was a single Polaroid. A small boy sitting on a hospital bed, wrapped in a blanket. He looked thinner, paler. But his eyes, those green eyes, burned through time itself. Claire's knees weakened. She pressed the photo to her chest and sobbed silently. "It's him," she whispered. "It's my boy." When she regained her strength, she asked the obvious question. "Who brought him in?" Ruth checked the logbook. It just says Good Samaritan. No name. That was unusual. Hospitals always recorded identities. Was there any police report? Ruth hesitated. There was. But it was sealed. The state handled it privately. Claire's stomach turned. Privately? Sometimes they do that when a case involves sensitive circumstances. Back in her car, she could barely hold the steering wheel. The air felt thin. Everything she thought she knew about her son's disappearance was unraveling. Someone had known where he was. Someone had brought him there. But why didn't they say his name? Why didn't anyone connect him to her? She opened her notebook and wrote, Route 54. Hospital. Good Samaritan. Sealed file. That was her new trail. The next stop was the Department of Social Services. The receptionist gave her the kind of tight smile reserved for people who ask for impossible things. "Those records are sealed, ma'am." "It's my son." "I'm sorry. Only legal guardians can." Claire slammed the adoption photo onto the counter. "Look at him. He's mine." Her voice broke. The people in the waiting area turned to look. The receptionist froze for a moment, then lowered her voice. "If you want those files, you'll need a court order." Court orders took months. She didn't have months. That night, Claire returned to her motel, exhausted but determined. She spent hours digging online for anything about Michael Reynolds' adoptive family. Finally, she found it, a newspaper clipping from 2004. Local businessman and wife adopt abandoned boy, give him a second chance. The photo showed a smiling couple, Robert and Elaine Reynolds. Wealthy. Influential. Perfect. Something about their smiles felt wrong. Too polished. Too rehearsed. She searched deeper. Property records. Company ownerships. Donations. That's when she saw it. Robert Reynolds was the CEO of a private security firm that had once held government contracts, including child welfare transport services in the 1990s. Her blood ran cold. Was it possible that the man who rescued her son had once been part of the system that lost him? The next morning, Claire drove to the Reynolds neighborhood. The house was large, behind an iron gate. Perfect lawns. Perfect silence. She parked a few streets away and waited. At 4:15 p.m., school buses arrived. Children spilled out, laughing. And then there he was. Michael. He was taller now, 17 maybe, carrying a backpack, head down, earphones in. He looked normal. Happy even. She wanted to run to him, to scream his name. But something inside her whispered, not yet. So she watched. For hours. Until the lights in the house went out. That night she returned again. Parked down the street. She didn't notice the black SUV parked behind her until its headlights flashed once. Her pulse quickened. She started the engine, drove off, but the SUV followed. Left turn. Right turn. Still there. She pulled into a gas station, pretending to refuel. The SUV passed, tinted windows, government plates. Her stomach twisted. Someone knew she was looking. And someone didn't want her to find what she was looking for. Back in her motel, Claire stared at the Polaroid of her son. She realized something terrifying. For years, she'd been chasing ghosts, but now, she had become part of a secret no one wanted exposed. She whispered into the dark, "Evan, if they took you from me, I will take you back. No matter what it costs." And in that moment she made a silent promise, not just to find the truth, but to survive it. Claire didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the map she'd drawn on the motel wall, red threads connecting names, towns, dates. In the center, 2 words in capital letters, Good Samaritan. That phrase had been haunting her since she saw it in the hospital file. Someone had brought Evan to safety. Someone who never said a word. But who would do that, and why keep it secret for 20 years? The next morning, she went back to the hospital. Ruth, the archivist, looked surprised to see her again. "You said the report was sealed," Claire said. "But every report has a reference number, right?" "Yes," Ruth hesitated. "Why?" "Because if there's a number, there's a copy." Ruth sighed and looked around, then opened an old metal cabinet. After a moment, she whispered, "Don't tell anyone I showed you this." On the bottom shelf was a stack of carbon paper records, faint blue copies of incident reports. Ruth flipped through until she found one labeled case #W5479. At the top, the name, unknown minor, male, approximate age 6. And beneath, a signature, barely legible, but enough to make her heart stop. Delivered by J.K. Rains. A name. Finally, a name. That afternoon, Claire drove to the nearest public library and searched every database she could find. James Kenneth Rains. He wasn't hard to find. He had been a truck driver in the mid-90s, mostly along Route 54, the same road where Evan had been found. But what caught her eye was the obituary. J.K. Rains, 68, passed away in 2008. Survived by wife and 1 daughter, Emily Rains. Wichita, Kansas. Her hands trembled. The man was dead. But his daughter might know something. The next morning, she found the address. A small, pale yellow house at the edge of town. Claire sat in her car for nearly an hour before gathering the courage to knock. A woman in her 30s opened the door, tired eyes, messy hair, a baby on her hip. "Can I help you? Are you Emily Rains?" "Yes. My name is Claire Donovan. I think your father might have found my son in 1996. Emily's face went blank. "What?" Claire handed her the photocopy of the report. Emily stared at it for a long time, her lips tightening. "I know this handwriting," she whispered. "It's my dad's." She invited Claire inside. The living room smelled like coffee and dust. Old photographs lined the mantel, Emily as a child, her father beside an old red truck. "He used to drive through Route 54 all the time," Emily said quietly. "He talked about the things he'd seen, accidents, lost people, bad weather. But there was one story he never finished telling me." "What story?" Claire asked. "He said once he found a boy on the side of the road. Said the kid looked like he'd been running for days. He took him to the hospital, but when the police showed up, he told them it was better to leave it alone." Claire's blood ran cold. "Leave it alone? Why?" Emily shook her head. "He said some men came later, asking questions. Not cops, government people. He got scared after that. He stopped talking about it completely." "Did he say who those men were?" "No. Just that they weren't there to help the boy." Claire felt the room closing in. Her breath came shallow. For years she'd imagined her son lost, but what if he'd been found and taken again? Emily looked at her with sympathy. He always carried guilt about that. When he was sick before he died, he said, "There's something I need to fix, something I did wrong." "I thought he meant me." Claire whispered, "It wasn't you." Emily reached for a small wooden box on a shelf. "There might be something else." He kept a notebook. "I could never bring myself to read it." Inside was a leather-bound journal, worn and faded. Emily handed it to her carefully. "If this helps you, take it." Claire sat in her car, heart pounding as she opened the first page. The handwriting was shaky. The first entry read, April 7, 1996, found a boy today. No shoes. Covered in mud. Wouldn't speak. Looks about 6. There was a car in the ditch down the road. Empty. I wanted to call the cops, but something didn't feel right. A van drove by slowly, black windows. I swear it turned around when it saw me with the kid. Got scared. Drove straight to the hospital. The next page. April 10th. 2 men came to the house asking about the boy. Said they were from the state. I didn't trust them. One had a badge, but it looked fake. I told them I didn't know anything. Later, I saw the same van parked outside my house. And finally, April 15th. I think I made a mistake. They wanted that boy for a reason. He looked at me once, those eyes. God help me, I think someone took him before, and they'll take him again. Claire closed the book, her hands shaking violently. The air around her felt charged, heavy, electric, wrong. Someone had taken her son, and someone had wanted to keep her from finding out why. But now she had something no one could erase, proof that there had been a cover-up. That night, back at her motel, she wrote in her own notebook beside the old Polaroid. He was found once. He was taken again. This isn't over. She stared at the photo of her son, her voice trembling as she whispered into the dark. Evan, I'm coming for you. I swear to God I'm coming. The next morning, Claire couldn't shake the weight of the journal she had just read. She barely slept, her dreams tangled with images of her son, small, terrified, standing on the side of that lonely Kansas road. Now she knew one thing for certain. Someone had taken him twice. The question was, why? She started searching for anything related to child welfare contracts from the 1990s. The name Reynolds Security appeared again and again, always connected to protective transport, juvenile relocation, and private care facilities. Buried in an old newspaper archive, she found a small article from 1998. Private firm under investigation for mismanagement of youth transfers. By David Heller, staff reporter. Claire's eyes froze on the byline. A reporter. Someone who had already tried to expose this. She Googled him. The search results said, David Heller, investigative journalist, retired. Living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She packed her things before the sun rose. The drive took 8 hours. The desert stretched endlessly, the air thick with heat and dust. She found his house, a small adobe home on the edge of town. The front yard was full of old newspaper boxes and broken cameras. When he opened the door, she recognized him instantly from the photo in the article, gray beard, glasses, eyes that had seen too much. Mr. Heller? If this is about a story, I don't write anymore. It's not a story, she said softly. It's my son. Something in her voice made him pause. He opened the door wider. Inside, the air smelled of ink and old paper. Stacks of boxes filled the living room, each one labeled with names, dates, scandals. She handed him the Polaroid, the adoption photo, and the journal. He studied them silently, then looked up. Reynolds Security, he muttered. Haven't heard that name in years. You wrote about them, Claire said. Yeah, and I almost lost my job for it. He poured himself a cup of coffee, his hands shaking slightly. They were one of several private firms contracting with the state to relocate children, foster kids, runaways, abandoned minors. On paper it looked legitimate, but they were moving kids with incomplete paperwork. Some just disappeared. Claire's chest tightened. My son disappeared in 1994. He was found in 1996. The man who found him wrote about black vans, men with fake badges. Heller frowned. That sounds about right. He rummaged through an old box, pulling out a yellow folder marked Childline. Inside were copies of internal memos, old letters, and one document with the Reynolds logo. Urgent, transport minor to facility. Classification, unverified guardianship. Route 54 transfer scheduled April 1996. Her blood ran cold. Route 54. The same road. What facility? She whispered. Doesn't say. The files were redacted. But I remember, there was a place. Temporary center, outside Topeka. It was shut down after a fire in '97. Do you know where exactly? I might. He found an old road map, creased and yellow. There was a faint circle drawn near a small dot labeled Haven Creek. That's where the facility was, Heller said. Locals called it the farm. It wasn't a farm, though. Just concrete buildings in the middle of nowhere. No signage, no oversight. Claire whispered, they took my son there. Heller hesitated. If you go alone. But you should know, these people don't forget. She drove that same night. The desert turned into plains, the air colder as she crossed into Kansas again. By dawn, she reached the road leading to Haven Creek. It was little more than gravel now, lined with dead trees. At the end stood a chain-link fence and a no trespassing sign half covered in rust. Beyond it, ruins. Collapsed buildings, burned walls, an old guard post. She climbed through the hole in the fence, her flashlight cutting through the dust. Inside one of the buildings, she found what was left of an office. A scorched desk, charred filing cabinets. She kicked open a drawer. Papers fell out, blackened but still legible. On one page, she saw the logo again, Reynolds Youth Division. And under it, arrival date, April 7, 1996. Male, 6 years. Her breath caught. That was Evan. But below, another line, transferred, April 10th, Wichita General Hospital. It was all connected. She took photos of every document, then left quickly. As she got into her car, she saw dust rising in her rearview mirror, another vehicle approaching fast. Her hands trembled as she started the engine. The truck came closer, dark gray, unmarked. She floored the gas, turning sharply onto the main road. The truck followed for several miles before finally disappearing behind a hill. When she stopped, her pulse was still racing. She looked at the horizon, endless sky, endless road, and realized she was being watched. But she didn't care. Because for the first time in 20 years, she had proof that her son's disappearance was no accident. Someone had taken him. Someone had hidden him. And now she was coming for them. That night, she called Heller from a payphone. You were right, she said. I found the building. And? They kept records. It's real. There was silence on the line. Then his voice, low and grim. Claire, if you've found what I think you have, they'll come for you next. She stared into the night sky, her reflection in the phone booth glass, older, tired, but burning with purpose. Let them, she said. I've been waiting 20 years. For the next 2 days, Claire barely slept. She moved between cheap motels, always choosing a room with 2 exits. She covered the windows with towels, left the TV on for noise. The feeling of being followed never left her. Every car behind her stayed too long. Every stranger's glance felt loaded with meaning. The silence outside at night was no longer comforting, it was waiting. But none of it mattered. She finally had the truth. She mailed copies of the documents she'd found at Haven Creek to 3 different addresses, one to David Heller, one to herself, and one to a lawyer in Chicago she'd once read about who specialized in government corruption. If anything happened to her, she wanted the story to survive. On the morning of the 3rd day, the motel clerk knocked on her door. Package for you, he said, holding a brown envelope. She frowned. She hadn't told anyone where she was staying. There was no return address. No postage mark. Just her name, Claire Donovan, written in small, neat handwriting. Her pulse quickened. She locked the door, sat on the bed, and slowly opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was uneven, hesitant. And the first line made her heart stop. Hi, Mom. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hands began to shake violently. She kept reading. I don't know if this will find you. I was told my mother didn't want me. But I don't believe that anymore. I remember things, small things. A red jacket. A song you used to hum. A voice that said everything would be okay. They told me those were dreams, but they weren't. I don't know what's real anymore. I think my name used to be Evan. Her vision blurred as tears filled her eyes. Please don't try to find me. They're watching. If you do, they'll move me again. But I needed you to know, I'm alive. And I never stopped thinking about you. Your son. At the bottom, in shaky letters, was a single word written twice, like he'd tried to remember how to spell it. Evan. She sat there for a long time, staring at the letter, her whole body trembling. It felt like a miracle and a threat at the same time. Someone had found her. Someone had given her this letter. And that meant he was alive. When she called Heller, her voice was barely a whisper. I got a letter. From who? My son. He's alive. There was silence, then a sharp inhale on the other end. Claire, listen to me, that means someone knows where you are. That letter couldn't have just appeared. I don't care, she said, crying. He's alive. You need to get out of there. Now. She looked around the small room, the peeling wallpaper, the humming refrigerator. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. She felt alive too. No, she said. If he found me once, he'll find me again. That night, she read the letter over and over until she could recite it from memory. Every word was a pulse, a heartbeat she'd thought she'd lost. She searched the handwriting, looking for proof, something only he could have known. And then she saw it, 3 small dots in the corner of the page, drawn like a triangle. Her heart skipped. Evan used to do that, little, magic triangles, he'd called them. He said they were good luck. This wasn't a hoax. It was him. The next morning, she went to the post office, demanding to know where the letter had come from. The clerk said it had been dropped in a local mailbox. No tracking, no ID. She asked to see the box. Inside, the clerk found a second envelope, addressed to someone else, David Heller. Her pulse quickened again. She grabbed it, tore it open. It was the same paper, same handwriting. Mr. Heller, I know you tried to help before. They said you stopped, but I think you didn't. If you still can, please tell her not to look for me. They're watching the places she's been. But I wanted her to know she didn't lose me. Tell her I remember the song. At the bottom of the page was a single line written in shaky handwriting. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Claire gasped, her hand covering her mouth. That was the lullaby she used to sing to him every night. By the time she reached Heller's house, she was half crazed with adrenaline. He opened the door, saw her face, and said, You got one too. She nodded, breathless, tears streaming down her cheeks. It's him, David. It's my son. He remembers me. He led her inside, locked the door. His hands trembled as he held the 2 letters side by side. Same handwriting. Same ink. But no fingerprints. That doesn't matter, she said. He's alive. That's all that matters. Claire, Heller said quietly, if he's alive, then he's still under someone's control. That means they let him write this. Which means they wanted you to know. Her voice faltered. Why? Maybe to warn you. Maybe to scare you. Or maybe, his voice lowered, maybe he's trying to tell you where he is. That night, Claire studied the letter again. She read each word like a code. There were odd gaps between sentences, spaces that didn't belong. She wrote down the letters that followed each space. C, O, R, U. Cold Farm. Her stomach dropped. That was what locals had called the old Reynolds facility before it burned down, the Cold Farm. It wasn't just a letter. It was a message. He wanted her to know where to look next. Claire folded the letter carefully, holding it against her heart. Evan, she whispered, you're not alone anymore. Then she started packing. Flashlight, camera, the map of Kansas, and her son's old red jacket, the one she'd kept all these years. She was going back to the place where everything began, the place where her world had ended, and maybe, just maybe, where it could begin again. Claire reached Haven Creek after sunset. The air was heavy with dust and silence, the kind that made you feel like the world was holding its breath. The dirt road looked the same as before, endless and empty, but something in the air felt different this time. She parked her car behind a cluster of dead trees, turned off the headlights, and waited. The ruins of the facility loomed in the distance, dark, skeletal shapes against the fading light. For 20 years, she had dreamed of this place. Now it stood before her, still alive in a way that terrified her. She waited until the moon rose. Then she grabbed her flashlight and the old red jacket. Every step toward those buildings made her heart pound louder. The fence had been patched with new wire. That was the first sign. The second was the faint hum she heard when she got closer. Not wind, not animals, but electricity. Someone had restored power here. Inside, the walls were still scorched from the fire years ago, but fresh footprints marked the dust on the floor. She crouched, shining her light, boot prints, small and deep, leading toward the old administration building. Her pulse quickened. She followed. The hallway was narrow, lined with broken glass and rusted pipes. Somewhere deeper inside, a door creaked. She froze, turning off the flashlight. Her breathing was the only sound. Then, a faint clang. Like metal on metal. She moved quietly, her shoes barely touching the floor. At the end of the corridor, she saw a glow, a soft blue light coming from under a half-closed door. She pushed it open slowly, just enough to see inside. A small generator hummed in the corner. Beside it, on a metal table, lay a pile of papers and a cracked laptop. But what stopped her heart was the wall above it, covered in photographs. Dozens of them. Children. Different ages, different faces, each one pinned with a small white tag. She moved closer, her flashlight trembling in her hand. And then she saw him. Evan. Older, maybe 17. Smiling faintly in a school photo. The same eyes. The same tiny scar. She touched the image, tears filling her eyes. Beneath the photo, someone had written in black marker. Transferred, Phase 3. A noise behind her made her spin around. A flashlight beam hit her in the face. Who are you? A voice demanded. She froze. A man stood in the doorway, tall, wearing a security jacket with no insignia. You're trespassing, he said sharply. This property is restricted. Where is he? She whispered. Who? My son. His picture is on that wall. The man frowned, then stepped closer. You shouldn't be here. Tell me where he is. Ma'am, you need to leave. Before he could finish, she swung the flashlight, striking his arm. The man cursed and stumbled back. Claire ran. Down the hall. Through the dark. Her heart thundered like it was trying to break free from her chest. Behind her, the man shouted, Stop! You don't understand. But she didn't stop. Not now. Not ever. She burst through a side door and ran toward the fence. The night air was freezing, her lungs burning. She climbed the wire, cutting her hands, and fell to the ground on the other side. When she looked back, the man was standing in the doorway, flashlight in hand. He didn't chase her. He just watched. For a long moment, their eyes met. Then he lowered the light and disappeared inside. She drove until the sun came up. Her hands shook on the steering wheel, blood crusted on her palms. She stopped at a gas station miles away, locked herself in the restroom, and looked in the mirror. Her face was pale, eyes wild, like someone who'd crossed a line she could never uncross. From her jacket pocket, she pulled out something she'd grabbed from the table before she ran, a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it carefully. It was a transfer log. Dates. Codes. Names. Most were smudged or burned, but one line was still clear. Reynolds, Michael, transfer scheduled, December 12, 2012. Destination, CDF, Cold Division Facility. She stared at it, her mind racing. Michael Reynolds. Her son's adopted name. And the date, that was only 2 years ago. He was still being moved. Claire drove straight back to Heller's house. He opened the door, took one look at her and said, You found something, didn't you? She dropped the paper on his table. He read it once, then twice. His jaw tightened. CDF. I've seen that before, he muttered. Cold Division Facility, it's not public. It's part of a defense subcontract. They hide it under different names. Where is it? I don't know. But I can find out. For the first time in 20 years, Claire felt something stronger than pain, momentum. It was no longer a question of if. It was a matter of when. Someone had tried to erase her son. But she had found the proof he still existed. And now, she had the fire to burn the whole system down if that's what it took. That night, she sat on Heller's porch as the wind howled through the desert. She unfolded Evan's letter again, the one that started it all. Her fingers traced the words, "I don't know what's real anymore." She whispered, "I'll show you what's real, sweetheart. The truth. All of it." Then she looked up at the stars, the same ones she used to show him as a child, and smiled through her tears. Because somewhere under that same sky, her son was looking too. And this time, they were both awake. For the next week, Claire and Heller lived like fugitives. They slept in roadside motels, kept the blinds closed, and used prepaid phones. Each night, the sound of trucks passing on the highway made her flinch. But every morning, they worked, piecing together the fragments of a truth too dark to speak aloud. The name Cold Division Facility appeared in 3 different databases, none of them public. Each reference linked to Reynolds Defense Systems. The same name, the same man, the same company that had adopted her son. Heller spent hours on his laptop, hacking through layers of old government contracts and archives. Claire sat beside him, reading every file they uncovered. "Look at this," Heller said one morning. 1995, Reynolds Defense receives federal funding under a pilot program, Project Resilience. What kind of program? It says juvenile behavioral study, but the language is vague. Controlled environments, response conditioning, identity restructuring. "That's not a study," Claire whispered. "That's control." The deeper they went, the worse it got. There were records of missing children, hundreds of them, many listed as transferred, not missing. Some were later adopted by families connected to the contractors. Others had no records at all. And in the middle of it all, a name appeared again and again. CDF, Cold Division Facility, Site 4. It wasn't a school or a shelter. It was something else. "I found a name," Heller said one night. A former employee. Worked security at a CDF site until 2013. He filed a complaint before he disappeared. Who is he? Name's Alan Pierce. Lives, or lived, in Missouri. They found an old address. An hour later, they were on the road again. The house was small and isolated, hidden behind overgrown trees. No car. No mailbox. The porch was falling apart. Claire knocked. No answer. She was about to leave when a voice came from inside. "Go away." "Alan Pierce." Silence. "I'm not with the government," she said. "I just want to know what happened at Cold Division." The door opened an inch. A single eye stared at her. "Who sent you?" "No one. My son was there." Another pause. Then the sound of a chain being undone. The man who appeared looked older than his years, thin, hollow-eyed, trembling. "You shouldn't have come," he said quietly. "They still watch. Please. I just want to know what they did to the kids." He led them inside. The house was dark, curtains drawn tight. Papers and photographs covered the table, old ID badges, maps, security logs. "We thought it was a rehab program," Pierce said. "That's what they told us. Troubled kids, behavioral therapy." But it wasn't that. They were testing reactions, stress, fear, obedience. Making them forget things. Training them to follow orders. Claire's stomach turned. They were experimenting on children? He nodded slowly. "They called it conditioning. We called it hell." "Do you remember a boy named Evan Donovan?" He would have been around 6 when he arrived. Pierce frowned. "We didn't use names. Just numbers. But there was one kid, they called him E9. He was quiet, smart, always trying to protect the others. The staff said he had high compliance potential." Claire's chest tightened. "9, she whispered. "Evan." "He was one of the ones who got out," Pierce said. "After the fire. I don't know how." What fire? They said it was an accident. But it wasn't. Someone started it, maybe one of the kids. Maybe one of us. I helped a few escape through the loading dock. But the next day, the government shut it all down. Everyone who talked got a visit. A visit? He looked at her, eyes wide with something between guilt and terror. From men who didn't wear badges. He reached under the table and pulled out a small metal box. Inside were a few photographs, grainy, taken with an old camera. One of them made Claire gasp. A group of children standing in a line, wearing identical gray clothes. Their faces blank, eyes distant. In the middle, a boy with sandy hair. Evan. Her hand covered her mouth. That's him. He was one of the special ones, Pierce said quietly. They took him away before the fire. I don't know where. Do you know who took him? Pierce hesitated, then said one word. Reynolds. Claire felt her blood freeze. Robert Reynolds? He nodded. He wasn't just a contractor. He ran it. He chose which kids were rehabilitated and which were transferred. He had a list. A list of what? Children with no one left looking for them. The room fell silent. Claire felt like she couldn't breathe. For years she had been told she was crazy, obsessed, delusional, and all along she had been right. Do you have proof? She asked. Pierce looked toward the window. Not anymore. But you do. That letter your son sent, it means he remembers. That's more than they ever wanted. Outside, the wind picked up. A car door slammed somewhere down the road. Pierce's face went white. You need to go, he said suddenly. Now. What? They found me once before. They'll come again. Please, go. He pushed the metal box into her hands. Take it. It's all I have left. Before she could speak, he shut the door. Claire and Heller ran to the car. In the rearview mirror, she saw two black SUVs turning onto the dirt road. Drive! Heller shouted. Gravel sprayed under the tires as they sped away. Headlights flared behind them. They're following, she yelled. Hold on. The chase lasted minutes that felt like hours. The roar of engines, the blinding lights, the echo of gunmetal fear in her chest. Then, suddenly, silence. They turned onto an abandoned service road, lights off, holding their breath. The SUVs passed. They stopped miles later. The night was still. Claire opened the metal box. Inside were more photos, files marked E-Series, fragments of reports, and one small flash drive. Written on it, in shaky handwriting, E9/M. Reynolds. She closed her eyes. He was alive. He had survived. And now she had proof. They can chase me all they want, she whispered, but they'll never erase him again. And as the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in 20 years, certainty. Not just that her son was alive, but that the people who took him had finally made one mistake too many. The morning after the chase, the desert air was cool and colorless. Claire sat on the hood of the car, the metal box open beside her. The small flash drive inside glinted like something sacred or cursed. You think it still works? She asked. Only one way to find out, Heller said. They drove to an old diner on the edge of town. Heller asked to use the manager's office, flashed his old press ID, and locked the door behind them. He plugged in the flash drive. The screen flickered, then loaded a single folder, CDF_records_2009. Inside, a list of files, each named by code. But one stood out, E9_Reynolds_video MP4. Heller clicked play. The video was grainy, black and white. A timestamp in the corner read March 14, 2009. A man in a lab coat stood beside a metal table. Behind him, a large mirror, the kind used for observation. On the table sat a boy, about 14, hands clasped tightly in his lap. Even after all these years, Claire knew that face. Evan. Older, taller, but still him. The same eyes that used to look up at her when he couldn't sleep. Her hand covered her mouth. Researcher. State your name. Boy. Michael. Researcher. Last name? Boy. Reynolds. Researcher. And before that? The boy hesitated. Then whispered, almost too softly to hear. I don't remember. The man scribbled something on a clipboard. Researcher, do you remember your mother? Evan's jaw tensed. His eyes darted toward the mirror. Boy, she didn't want me. Researcher, who told you that? Silence. Then the boy whispered, he did. Researcher, who's he? Evan looked straight at the camera. And in that single glance, cold, aware, defiant, Claire felt something she hadn't felt before. Her son wasn't broken. He was fighting. The video cut to another clip, security footage. A corridor. Children walking in lines. Guards at every door. Then chaos. Fire alarms. A boy running, Evan again clutching something in his hands. He disappeared through a side door, another kid behind him. The video ended. Heller leaned back, stunned. He started the fire, he said quietly. He tried to save them. Claire wiped tears from her cheeks. He tried to save himself. There's more, Heller said, clicking through the folders. Another file opened, a scanned report titled Project Resilience, Final Phase. It described a program designed to recondition trauma response in minors to improve obedience and emotional detachment. In other words, they were teaching children not to feel. Claire's stomach turned. They turned them into experiments. And your son was the only one who escaped, Heller said. That's why Reynolds adopted him, to keep him close, to keep him quiet. She stared at the screen, her reflection warped in the glass. For years she had imagined her son as lost, broken, suffering. But now she saw him for what he was, a survivor in a world built to erase him. We need to get this out, Heller said. If we publish it, the whole operation comes down. And if they find us first? Then at least we won't die silent. They made copies of the files, sending them to multiple cloud drives, journalists, and human rights groups under anonymous names. By evening, the story had a pulse of its own. Emails, phone calls, encrypted messages. Someone out there knew the name Cold Division Facility. Someone else wanted it buried again. That night, as they prepared to leave, Claire noticed a small detail in the video files, metadata coordinates. A location tag. She opened the file properties. Latitude, 39.2548. Longitude, minus 96.7264. Her heart raced. It was Kansas. Near Topeka. Another facility. Still active. We have to go, she said. Claire. He's there, David. I can feel it. He hesitated, then nodded. Then let's end this. The next day, they drove through endless plains under a bruised sky. Storm clouds gathered as they turned off the highway onto a dirt road. In the distance, surrounded by fields, stood a building too modern to be abandoned. Floodlights, cameras, and a tall gate. Cold Division Facility, Site 6. Heller parked far back. We can't just walk in, he said. I'm not walking in, she said. I'm walking home. She waited until nightfall. Then she slipped through a drainage ditch and crawled toward the fence. Her heart pounded in her ears as she cut through the wire. Inside, she moved like a shadow, past security lights, past silent cameras. The building was cold, sterile, too quiet. She opened a door and froze. A hallway lined with glass rooms. Each one empty, except one. A single light flickered inside. A figure sat on a cot, facing the wall. Her voice broke as she whispered, Evan? The figure turned. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he stood slowly, eyes wide, face pale under the light. She took one trembling step forward. It's me, she whispered. Mom. For a moment, the world stopped breathing. The dim light buzzed overhead, flickering against the sterile white walls. The air smelled of disinfectant and something metallic, like fear itself. Evan, or Michael as they had forced him to be, stood frozen inside the glass room. He was taller now, almost a man, but his eyes, those green eyes, were the same ones that once looked up at her from a grocery cart full of cereal boxes. Claire pressed her hand to the glass. Evan, she whispered. He didn't move. His jaw clenched, eyes darting between her and the door. I'm your mother. Still silence. He tilted his head slightly, as if trying to recognize a word he hadn't heard in years. Then quietly, "That's not possible." Her heart cracked. "It is. It's me, sweetheart. Claire. I never stopped looking for you." "You can't be real," he said flatly. "They tried this before." "What?" "Vitesse. They show us pictures, voices, tell us things. They said if I talk, I fail." Tears filled her eyes. She touched the glass harder, her voice shaking. "No one's testing you. You're safe now. Look at me. Look at me." For the first time, he met her gaze. His lips trembled, not with fear, but with something deeper, older. "You're the one from the dreams," he said softly. Her knees gave out. She fell against the glass, sobbing. "It's not a dream, baby. It's me. It's real." He moved closer, almost afraid. He pressed his hand to the glass, matching hers. Their fingers met through the cold surface, separated by 2 inches of transparent history. "You remembered the song," she whispered. "You sent me the letter." "I wasn't supposed to," he said. "They found out. That's why they moved me here." "Who moved you?" "The man in the white coat. The one who calls himself Reynolds." The name hit her like lightning. "He's still alive?" Evan nodded. "He says he made me who I am." "He didn't make you," she said fiercely. "He took you. But you're still mine." He looked at her like he wanted to believe it, like part of him did. But years of conditioning had built walls higher than any prison. "If you're really my mom," he said quietly, "what's the last thing you said to me?" She closed her eyes. The memory was a wound she'd carried for 2 decades. "I said, stay close, sweetheart." His breath hitched. "And I didn't." "You were 4, she said through tears. "You didn't do anything wrong. They said you gave me away." They lied. Something broke inside him. He sank to the floor, trembling. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I thought I made you disappear." "No, baby," she said softly. "They just tried to make you forget." He pressed his forehead to the glass. "I don't know who I am anymore." "You're my son," she said. "That's all that matters." Behind her, Heller's voice whispered urgently, "We need to move. Someone's coming." She didn't look back. "We're leaving, Evan," she said. "You can't," he whispered. "The doors are locked from the outside." "Then we'll find a way." "No, you don't understand. If we open it, the alarms." The lights suddenly turned red. A low, mechanical wail filled the air. "The alarms." Heller grabbed her arm. "Claire, we have to go, now." "I'm not leaving him." The sound of boots echoed down the corridor. "Shuts." Claire turned back toward the glass. Evan stood, eyes wide with terror, not for himself, but for her. "Run," he shouted. "No." He slammed his hand against the glass. "Go." A door burst open behind her, 2 guards, weapons raised. Heller fired a warning shot into the ceiling. The guards ducked, shouting. Claire ran to the console beside the room. There was a keypad, glowing green. "Evan." "The code." He hesitated, then shouted, 907. She entered it. The lock clicked. The glass door hissed open. For the first time in 20 years, she held her son. The moment their bodies met, time collapsed. She could feel every second of pain, every sleepless night, every whispered prayer, all crashing together into one impossible heartbeat. He clung to her like someone drowning. "I knew you'd come," he whispered. "Always," she said. Heller shouted, "Move." They ran through the corridor, alarms blaring, red lights flashing like pulses of danger. As they reached the exit, a familiar voice echoed from behind them, cold, calm, deliberate. "You shouldn't have come here, Mrs. Donovan." She turned. Standing at the end of the hallway was Robert Reynolds. Older, but unmistakable, the same man from the photo all those years ago. "You took everything from me," she said. "No," he replied. "I gave him a purpose. You gave him nothing but weakness." Evan stepped forward, trembling with fury. "You lied to me." "I built you," Reynolds said. "Without me, you're no one." Evan's jaw tightened. "Then I'd rather be no one." He lunged forward, pulling Claire behind him. Heller fired again. this time at the overhead lights, plunging the corridor into darkness. "Go!" he shouted. They ran. They burst out into the cold night air, the sound of sirens echoing behind them. Heller's car waited by the fence, engine running. Evan turned once more to look back, the building that had caged him glowing red from the alarms. Claire grabbed his hand. "Don't look back," she whispered. And for the first time, he didn't. The car roared down the empty road, the night tearing past them like a storm. Evan sat in the back seat, breathing hard, staring at his trembling hands. Claire kept turning around, as if to make sure he was real, that this wasn't another cruel illusion. Behind them, distant headlights flickered and vanished. "We're clear," Heller said, voice hoarse. "For now." Claire reached back, touching Evan's arm gently. "Are you hurt?" "No," he whispered. "Just cold." She pulled the red jacket from her bag, the same one he'd worn the day he disappeared, and handed it to him. He stared at it for a long moment, then put it on. It fit him differently now, but somehow it looked right. "I remember this," he said softly. Her eyes filled with tears. "You used to say it made you feel brave. I think I still need that." They drove for hours. The road stretched endlessly through the dark plains of Kansas, lit only by the headlights and the occasional flash of lightning in the distance. No one spoke for a long time. Then Heller said, "Once the story goes live, they won't be able to hide this anymore. The files are everywhere now, mirrored, encrypted, public." "You published it?" Claire asked. He nodded. "Half the world will know by morning." "Then it's over," she whispered. "No," Evan said quietly. "It's only beginning." By dawn, they reached an abandoned farmhouse off Route 66. They parked inside the barn and collapsed onto old hay bales. For the first time in decades, Claire felt something close to peace, fragile, trembling but real. Evan sat beside her, holding the letter he had once sent. "I wrote this because I wanted you to remember me," he said. "I never forgot," she said. He smiled faintly. "I thought I dreamed you." "You did. And I dreamed you back." But the peace didn't last. The sound came first, low, distant, mechanical. A helicopter. Heller looked out the window, his face going pale. "They found us." Claire grabbed Evan's hand. "Run." They sprinted through the fields as the helicopter's searchlights swept across the grass. A voice crackled through a loudspeaker. "Stop. You're surrounded." Bullets tore through the air. Dirt exploded at their feet. They reached an old irrigation trench and dove inside. Heller stayed behind the car, firing a small pistol, shouting, "Go! Don't stop!" Claire screamed, "David!" He turned once, smiled faintly, and then, silence. The helicopter's lights swung toward the barn, flames rising as the bullets hit the gas tank. They crawled through the field until the light faded behind them. When they finally stopped, the horizon was turning pink. Evan collapsed to the ground, gasping. Claire knelt beside him, brushing his hair back. "He's gone," she whispered. Evan stared at her. "He saved us." "He saved you." They sat in silence as the first sun in 20 years rose over both of them. Later that morning, Claire drove them to a small town hours away. They checked into a roadside motel under false names. Evan sat by the window watching the world, cars, people, sunlight, like it was something strange and new. "What happens now?" he asked. She smiled softly. "Now we live." "Can I ever be normal?" She hesitated. "Maybe not. But you can be free." He looked down at his hands, scarred, shaking, but alive. "I think I'd rather be free." That evening, news reports began to break across every channel. Federal investigation launched into private child rehabilitation programs. Whistleblower evidence suggests decades-long cover-up. Reynolds Defense Systems denies allegations, so under arrest. Claire watched the screen in silence, tears streaming down her face. "It's over," Evan whispered. She shook her head. "No, honey. It's begun. The truth always begins where fear ends." That night, Evan couldn't sleep. He stepped outside, the desert wind cool on his skin. The stars stretched above him, endless, alive, the same ones his mother used to show him in the backyard. He whispered into the night, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." Behind him, Claire appeared in the doorway. "Still your song," she said softly. He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen in 20 years. It always was. Months later, the headlines faded, the world moved on. But for Claire and Evan, life had only just begun. They found a small house in Oregon, quiet, green, far from the noise. Evan started therapy, began painting, even smiled without flinching sometimes. Some nights, when the rain tapped against the windows, Claire would wake and watch him sleeping. He looked peaceful, human again. And in those moments, she finally understood she hadn't rescued him from the past. She had joined him there, so they could walk out of it together. The last scene in her mind was always the same, that little boy in the supermarket aisle, turning to look at her, the cereal box still in his hands. This time, she didn't blink. This time, she reached out and never let go. Epilogue. 2 years later. A documentary crew visited their small home to record the story that changed everything. Evan sat beside his mother, quiet but steady. When the interviewer asked him what he remembered most, he smiled faintly and said, "The fog." "The fog?" "Yeah," he said. "For years I thought I was trapped in it. But turns out I was just waiting for the sun." He looked at his mother. She smiled through tears. And somewhere, far away, in the ruins of a forgotten facility, the last light flickered and went out for good.